Hi everyone, this is JCK, and this should be the final installment of the first book by Vladimir Megre from the Ringing Cedars series. This is Anastasia, and we got cut off in the last recording towards the end of chapter 28. So we're going to read the last little bit of chapter 28 and then continue on into the remaining chapters of this book. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you've been watching or listening to all of the recordings. And so we begin now with the last section of chapter 28 of Anastasia. I needed to leave to catch up to my ship after waiting until she had started to regain her almost normal appearance. I got into the motorboat. Anastasia took hold of the bow with her hand and pushed the boat away from the shore. The boat was swept up and began floating downstream with the current. Anastasia stood in the water almost up to her knees. The hem of her long skirt got wet and flapped about in the waves. I gave the starting cord a tug, and the motorboat roared into life, breaking the silence I had grown accustomed to over the past 3 days. The boat gave a jerk forward, picked up more and more speed, and soon began to distance itself from the diminutive figure of the Taiga recluse, standing all alone in the shallow water near the riverbank. All at once, Anastasia rushed out of the water and started running along the bank after the boat. Her long hair, trailing behind her from the headwind, looked like a comet's tail. She tried to run very fast, probably using all of her remaining strength in an effort to do the impossible, catch up to a speeding motorboat. But even she wasn't up to that. The distance between us gradually increased. I started feeling sorry for her fruitless efforts. Wanting to shorten the difficult moments of parting, I pushed down on the gas lever with all of my might. Then the thought flashed through my head that Anastasia might think that I had taken fright once more and was running away. The motor, now roaring in bursts, lifted the boat's bow out of the water, making it speed forward faster and faster and increasing the distance between us even more. As for her, oh Lord, what was she doing? Anastasia ripped off the wet skirt that was slowing her down and cast aside her torn clothes. She increased her tempo, and the incredible happened. The distance between her and the boat gradually began to decrease. On the path ahead of her loomed a steep slope, leading to an almost vertical drop-off, continuing to press the gas lever to the limit. I thought that the incline would stop her in her tracks and bring this difficult episode to a quick end. But Anastasia continued her headlong rush, occasionally stretching out her arms in front of her as though using them to sense the space ahead. Could it be that her eyesight had become so poor that she couldn't see the slope? Without slowing down in the least, Anastasia ran straight up the slope. Reaching the top, she fell on her knees, threw up her arms towards the sky, turned slightly in my direction and began shouting something. I could hear her voice over the wild roar of the motor and the noise of the waves. I heard, as though in a whisper, "There are shallows ahead, shallows, sunken logs." I quickly jerked my head forward, not fully able to grasp what was happening, and gave such a hard pull on the rudder that the lower side of the sharply tilted boat almost submerged to the point of taking on water. A huge sunken log, one end grounded in a sandbar, the other barely visible on the surface, slightly scraped against the side of the speeding boat. If it had been a direct hit, it would easily have torn a gaping hole in the thin aluminium bottom. Once out in the mid-channel, I turned to glance at the cliff and whispered in the direction of the lonely figure standing on her knees, which was slowly being transformed into a vanishing dot. "Thank you, Anastasia." End of chapter 28. Chapter 29. Who are you, Anastasia? The ship was waiting for me at Surgut. The captain and crew were awaiting my instructions, but there was no way I could concentrate my efforts on working out the subsequent itinerary, and ordered the ship's crew to continue standing in port at Surgut, hold parties for the local population to come and have a good time and keep up with the promotion and the sales exhibits. My thoughts were occupied with my experiences with Anastasia. At a local shop, I purchased a great deal of popular science literature, books on extraordinary occurrences and people's unusual abilities, as well as the history of Siberia. I squirreled myself away in my cabin, trying to find in all these books some sort of plausible explanation. In addition, I wondered whether Anastasia's shouting of, "I love you, Vladimir," in her attempts to help the village girl could have really engendered in her a feeling of love for me. How is it that mere words, which we often utter without putting a sufficient amount of suitable feelings into them, could have affected Anastasia? In spite of the differences in our ages and views on life and lifestyles. The popular science literature gave me no clues. Then I picked up the Bible, and there it was, my answer. At the very outset of the Gospel, according to John, I read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." For the umpteenth time, it struck me how laconic and precise were the definitions of this amazing book. Immediately, a lot of things became clearer in my mind. Anastasia, incapable as she was of trickery or deceit, could not just simply utter meaningless words. I remembered her saying, "It seemed as though I had forgotten at that moment that it was not enough just to simply utter those words. There definitely had to be behind them feelings and awareness and trustworthiness of natural information." Oh God, how disappointingly her hopes had turned out. Why had she addressed these words to me? Here I was, no longer in my prime, someone with a family, enslaved to a great many of this world's temptations, dark and destructive, as she herself said. With her degree of inner purity, she deserved someone else entirely. But who could fall in love with her, given such an extraordinary lifestyle, mentality, and intellect? First glance, she comes across as an ordinary girl, albeit extremely beautiful and attractive. But once you get to know her, it is as though she is transformed into some kind of creature, living way beyond the bounds of the rational. It may very well be that this impression of mine is due to my imperfect knowledge of things, my insufficient understanding of what constitutes our being. Others might have entirely different perception of her. I recalled that even at our parting, I did not feel any particular desire to kiss or embrace her. I don't know whether she would have wanted me or not. Anyway, what exactly did she want? I recalled her telling me of her dreams. What a strange philosophical bent her love had. Organize a fellowship of entrepreneurs to help them? Write a book passing along her advice to people? Carry people across the dark forces window of time? And she believes it all. She is convinced that that's how it will all turn out. Oh, I was a good one. I promised I would try and organize a fellowship of entrepreneurs and write a book. And now she'll probably be having even more fantastic dreams about that. She might have thought up something simpler, more realistic. An inexplicable sense of pity for Anastasia arose in my heart. I could imagine her sitting there in her forest, waiting and dreaming that everything would work out the way in broad daylight. Fine, if she were simply content to wait and dream. But who knows? She may go beyond that and start taking steps on her own, focusing that ray of goodness of hers, expending the colossal energy of her heart and believing in the impossible. And even though she showed me what she could do with her ray and attempted to explain to me how it works, somehow my consciousness still can't accept it as something real. Judge for yourselves, dear readers. In her own words, she aims her ray at a person, illuminates this person, this man, with an invisible light, and imparts to him her feelings and aspirations towards goodness and light. No, 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 no. Do you not just think that I am interfering with a person's mental makeup? That I am violating his heart and mind? I remember her telling me. Man is free. People are free to accept or reject my advice, only to the degree that they themselves find it to their liking. Something close to their heart will be able to accept these feelings as their own. Then they will become lighter and brighter in their appearance too, and your diseases will leave them, either partially or completely. My grandfather and great-grandfather can do this, and I have always been able to. Great-grandfather taught me when he played with me in childhood. But now my ray has become many times stronger than grandfather's and great-grandfather's, because in me has been born that extraordinary feeling called love. It is so bright and clear and even a little fiery. There is such a lot of it, and I want to share it. With whom, Anastasia? I had asked. With you? With others? With anyone who can accept it? I want everyone to experience good. When you begin to do what I have dreamt of, I shall bring many of these people to see you, and together you, remembering all of this, picturing her in my mind, I suddenly realized that I couldn't help but carry out, at least try to carry out her wishes. If I didn't, I would be tormented with doubt for the rest of my life, along with the feeling that I had betrayed Anastasia and her dream. Perhaps her dream wasn't all that realistic, but it was something she passionately desired. I made my decision, and the ship headed full steam for Novosibirsk. The unloading and disassembling of the exhibit equipment I left to my firm's executive director. After somehow managing to explain the situation to my wife, I set out for Moscow. I set out for Moscow to make, or at least try to make, Anastasia's dream come true. To be continued. End of chapter 29. Chapter 30. Author's message to the readers. Dear readers, thank you. Thank you all who have responded to Anastasia with kindness and understanding. Indeed, I could not imagine that she would actually be capable of arousing so many feelings and emotions. I would so like to answer all your letters individually, but for the time being at least, this is physically impossible. The last lines of this book were penned in the Caucasus, where I have joined local archaeologists and enthusiasts in investigating the dolmens Anastasia spoke about, and we found them, saw them with our own eyes, took pictures. These are ancient stone constructions, 10,000 years old. They have functional significance even for people living today. They are located in the south, in the mountains of the Caucasus, not far from the cities of Novosibirsk, Gelendzhik, and Torpus. They are the precursors of the pyramids of Egypt, but the local residents didn't pay any attention to the dolmens, not appreciating their purpose. Even though the dolmens were classified as historic monuments, They were ransacked by local population. Their huge stones were carted off and even used to build a church in the settlement of Beregovo, which to me is nothing short of sheer blasphemy. Perhaps it was for this reason that 40 priests were cruelly tortured to death in the Kuban region during the revolutionary period of Russian history. One priest for each dolmen stone. People carried these stones off, not fully appreciating their significance. Now that Anastasia has spoken about them, all this will change. It is amazing, but a fact. Much of what she said has already been confirmed. And even the fluctuations she talked about, the background radiation of the Earth fluctuating near the dolmens, have been detected and reported on by local health officials. Out of all the things Anastasia told or showed to me, I have decided to publish only what has been directly or indirectly corroborated by scientific experiments, material objects, or historical facts. Though I am starting to think that we'd better simply listen some more with our hearts. It would be quicker that way. The other method of confirmation takes up an awful lot of time, as with the dolmens, for example. It took me pretty much half a year to collect historical data and trek through the Caucasus Mountains to see the dolmens with my own eyes and take pictures of them. I was finally convinced, but at the end of the day, it turns out that if I'd simply believed right off, I could have used this half year to greater advantage. It turns out that a great deal depends on one's ability to believe. I did get a chance to visit Anastasia a second time. I got a chance to see the son she bore and how she relates to him. A most unusual relationship. In addition, I had the opportunity of finding out from the people who ferried me to the spot on the riverbank about the various attempts on the part of both individuals and groups to penetrate Anastasia's domain and find her dwelling place for themselves. Many, no doubt, wished to see and talk with her out of well-meaning motives. But the people who ferried me also told me about a group of scoundrels who set up camp on the riverbank, sent out a helicopter to take pictures of the area, and tried to capture her. She was obliged to emerge from the taiga to talk with them and then send them packing, despite their attempts to restrain her physically. I shall tell all about that in the second book. I only ask people not to touch her, to leave her alone. Now, after the experience with these rotters, local hunters have taken it upon themselves to shoot strangers on sight. That's bad, of course, but I say, let them shoot. It turns out the local hunters knew about her existence long before I came along, only they never told anyone, and they never encroached upon her territory themselves. The locals talked with her only when she came out to them. I started having pangs of conscience for having told about her without hiding the location, especially in the first edition of the book, and for not changing the names of people I mentioned or even the name of the ship. Anastasia calmed my fears a little when she said, "Never mind. After all, I was the one who wanted to reveal myself to everybody. But I am wiser now. I shouldn't have mentioned specific names, and in future, I shall try to be more circumspect. But still, I want to emphasize, please don't disturb her. She herself will tell everything she feels is necessary to reveal. We must not do to her what we have already done to this one Siberian family, the Likovs, described by Vasily Peskov in his Komsomolskaya Pravda article, Dead End in the Taiga. As far as I know, the only member of this family remaining is Agafia, who is dying of cancer, left helpless, taken out the taiga. A real tragedy how things have turned out. The Likov family lived in the taiga for many years, but died out after contact with our enlightened civilization. Which way of life, then, is the real dead end? I can understand why so many people want to contact Anastasia, but it is impossible for her to meet and talk with everyone. And after all, Anastasia does have a child. There is an Anastasia Club or community organization operating in Galenzik, headed by Valentina Larionova, an ethnographer of 30 years' experience. She has organized a group of local ethnographers, along with people from a variety of professions who are sensitive to the spiritual legacy of their region and its ecological problems. This is one of the first clubs to be organized by readers of the Anastasia book. The members of the Galenzik Club have made what is, to my mind, a remarkable discovery. On the basis of information provided by Anastasia, they have restored to Russia, and quite possibly to the world, the forgotten shrines of our ancestors, and are now receiving people wishing to visit them and conducting tours to the places mentioned by Anastasia. About Galenzik, for example, Anastasia had this to say: "This city could have been richer than Jerusalem or Rome, but because of its rulers' neglect of its primal origins, this city is dying." I believe this, and other cities and settlements will be restored not by the rulers of the world, but by the hearts of ordinary people aroused by Anastasia. And there's more. Anastasia is now the subject of conversation among many healers, wizards, and preachers. "We are like ants compared to her," said the chairman of the Healers Foundation, Vladimir Mironov. I have seen a video recording of a speech given in front of a large audience by the leader of a religious denomination, in which he referred to Anastasia as the ideal of womanhood to which we should aspire. He added, "Her ability to draw inferences and conclusions and level of intellect far surpasses that of our population today." This video is now being copied and distributed. Much the same type of reaction is coming from people with extraordinary abilities living in India. Still, another religious leader said that while Anastasia is currently studying our life, she has not yet managed, unfortunately, to meet up with a real man. Later, I was told that there is one chap, very much like Anastasia, living in Australia, and that the two should meet. I, of course, do not have any pretensions to being a real man, far from it, even in my thinking. But perhaps it is still premature to think in terms of arranging a marriage, and it isn't right to idealize her to such an extent. It is this idealization of Anastasia that has prevented a timely recognition of what she has done. Just think calmly and rationally about what has happened. A child has been born, and I've held him in my arms. I have heard his little heart beating. There is a child. He is growing up, but he has no official birth certificate. He will grow up and want to go somewhere, maybe abroad, for instance. Maybe he'll want to see the world. Who will issue him a passport to travel abroad? What country is he a citizen of? What shall we tell him then? "Oh, well, somehow we haven't thought about any documents for you. You just stay here in the Taiga." I checked with a legal firm on the question of a birth certificate. The lawyer said Anastasia would have to had to give birth in a hospital. Then, even if she didn't have a medical record, they would have at least issued her a memo regarding the birth, which she could have used to obtain a proper birth certificate. The other alternative, said the lawyer, would be for her to abandon her child to an orphanage. They would issue him documents there. Orphanages can do that, and then have him adopted. But somehow, this alternative was not at all appealing, and I doubt that Anastasia would ever agree. So what to do? When I talked with her about a birth certificate, she responded, "Of course, it would be fine if he had one, just like everyone else." I suppose I let that slip by without really thinking about it, but do not be concerned. Everything will still work out. Note how she said, "I suppose I let that slip by without really thinking about it." I wonder how many other things she has let slip by, things which could be taken care of at a future stage. That means we can't fully count on everything working out exactly the way she said. I think we need to examine it all very carefully and at some point make adjustments to adapt to it to our reality. On another point, I hear talk about what a poor entrepreneur I am, not being able to print enough copies to keep pace with the demand. Indeed, I really can't at the moment. I have refused to sell exclusive rights to the book to any one publisher. I certainly don't want anyone to have exclusive control over the manuscript and put out whatever print runs they fancy. The publishers I talked with gave me this. The style needs to be edited and made more literary. It is present in its present form. It is only Anastasia's explanations and monologues that make the book worth anything at all. My language is seen as stilted. They suggest I think up a catchier title, something like Dead End in the Taiga, The Healer Girl, or even The Girl from Outer Space. But I do not consider Anastasia to be from outer space, nor do I consider her to be at a dead end in the Taiga. She herself, after all, simply wants to be man, a normal human being. Of course, I can always exercise my author's privilege, even in confrontation with publishing houses, but a lot of time would be wasted on that. I have been using the proceeds of the initial print run to pay for subsequent runs in the print shop, bypassing the publishing houses altogether. So things will even out in the long run. If someone is interested in assisting along this line to our mutual advantage, I'd be happy to listen, but without the condition of exclusive rights. I should also say a few words about a certain situation involving my relationship with my family. The Moscow group, now looking after distribution of the book, has received a number of letters and telephone calls about this. There have been complaints that calls and letters to my home address, indicated in the book, have not been met with any intelligible response. I left Novosibirsk, as I mentioned, directly upon my return from the expedition, and subsequent events will be described in my next book. Now I have learnt that my firm is falling apart and there has been nobody there to reply to inquiries. I'll see to it and bring it back to life once I finish my writing. As for my wife, I have only spoken to her on the telephone. It was a deeply personal conversation. However, I beg my correspondent's forgiveness for not responding right off and for my delay in sending out copies of the books. At present, my daughter Paulina is there. I have met with her. She will fix everything up, and in future, there should be no repetition of the trouble. I have had long talks with my daughter, and she understands everything. A little later, I plan to get a mobile telephone, and then I shall be able to chat more personally. I shall definitely respond to all the letters coming in, and maybe even publish some of them. They are worth publishing. There are letters about Russia, about love, about bright aspirations. They show the same energy Elena Ivanovna Rorich talks about in her book, Living Ethics. Thank you for these letters. But one letter in particular, a letter from a 13-year-old girl from Kolomna named Nastya, deserves to be answered right here and now, along with other girls who have written and will be writing. Here is her letter. Dear Vladimir Megre, my name is Nastya Shapkina from the city of Kolomna. I am 13 years old and I am in grade 7 at school. I read your book, The Ringing Cedar, Anastasia. I really, really liked it. Not just liked. That's not the best word here. It sounds too dry. After reading the book, I got a warm and happy feeling in my heart. They told me a lot about it in hospital. I've got a serious illness and I have to go to hospital every 2 months. And I really want to get well. And your book was like a ray of light amidst all this darkness and vulgarity. I really want to meet with you and especially with Anastasia. Could you help me? Right now, you're probably thinking how brash and impolite she is. But that's not true. You see, that's the way we all are. Until we see with our own eyes, we don't believe anyone. I don't even know whether to believe or not. Mama doesn't believe, and no one around here believes. It is so fantastic. And yet, why not? I mean, to be honest, I believed, I really did, but all my friends keep saying fairy tale, and I'm confused. Please help me. I think you are a very brave man. You have written the truth. Maybe you haven't yet told the whole world, but you've told a good part of it. That's for certain. Or the whole story. What happened between you and Anastasia, the way you offended her, and then it turned out she wasn't to blame, all sorts of things. Yet still, I think you shouldn't offend a person that way, even if, let's say, she's abnormal or a fake. But that's strictly my personal opinion. I mean, you may not agree with it. Vladimir, sorry, I don't know your patronymic. Did Anastasia have a child or not? And if she did, is it a boy or a girl? And what did your wife think of that? And my last question. You wrote that Anastasia's grandfather and great grandfather rubbed the piece of cedar with their fingers, but you never said that Anastasia did this too. Did she really not do it? Or did you just happen to leave it out? Please answer me. I know you get whole bagfuls of letters, but please, just a few lines. Goodbye. Anastasia. Dear Nastya, you will most certainly be a healthy, spiritually strong, and pretty girl. I shall ask Anastasia the next time I visit her to help you. Yes, Anastasia has a unique approach to healing. She looks upon illness as a conversation between God and man. An illness can be a warning or a deliverance from something even more terrible. And she showed me examples of this. I'll be telling about them later in a new book. I shall try and persuade her, though she's pretty stubborn about sticking to her views. She says it's only man himself, through his spirit and conscious awareness, who can cure anything without negative side effects, while outside interference is often harmful. Nastya, judging by your reaction to the book, you seem to be already healthier spiritually than a lot of people, and that's the main thing. I'm beginning to realize that that's really the case. As far as whether people around you believe or don't believe in Anastasia's existence, I'll answer you by quoting what someone said at one of my get-togethers with readers. When that question was put to me for the umpteenth time, he got up and declared in a loud voice, "Look, people, you're holding in your hands an impulse of inspiration, a thought bursting forth, a call to action, an idea. It's right there in your hands. What more do you want? A sample of her blood, urine, and feces for analysis? Is there no way you can do without that? After all, the greatest and most important proof is already sitting right there in your hands." You see, Nastya, I've come to the realization that Anastasia is an uncomfortable concept for many, and they'd rather she didn't exist at all. After all, she's breaking down a whole lot of technocratic theories, conventions, and priorities against the background of purity emanating from her. We suddenly start to become aware of our own filth, and that's not always what we want, especially when we like to think of ourselves as so good and smart and conscientious, no matter what we do. Anastasia said, "I exist for those for whom I exist." I didn't think there was anything special hidden in this statement. Anyone who wants to believe can believe. If they don't want to believe, they don't have to. However, I was mistaken. Some people read and nothing happens with them. Others, they find a great feeling of love, kindness, and inspiration welling up in their heart. And like a shower of spring rain, the world feels this grand poetry of love, a poetry of the heart which is capable of perceiving the light, magnifying it, and sharing it with others. These are the people who feel her and know that she does exist. As for my wife, Nastia, she reacted the way most women probably would. We've only spoken on the telephone. But my daughter Paulina is ready to help me. She understands everything and brings me letters. She was the one who brought me yours. You say it was wrong on my part to offend Anastasia that way. Of course it's wrong. I would never do anything like that again. The same people can be different at different times. Our son was born. He's such a strong little lad, smiles all the time, and Anastasia is happy and enjoying her life. My best to you and to your mama. I wish you joy and happiness in your life. You deserve it. You're a strong girl, and you can make your friends happier too, more consciously aware of things. A word about religious believers. Their inquiries and questions. I have spoken about Anastasia with members of the clergy from our Russian Orthodox Church, as well as with representatives of various denominations. Some of them are quite favourably disposed to her. Others say, with some apprehension, that she's most likely a heathen. She could break down people's faith in religious doctrine, or resurrect idolatry, or something nobody knows about yet. And it's wrong for her not to be baptized. Her attitude to religion will be discussed in greater detail in the second book, and it is really quite extraordinary. I'll just mention a few points here. You see, she told me, it is a good thing that they are already talking about the soul, about the good, the light. Who is the most worthy? I am unable to say. But what about the sects? I countered, the sects that have been banned. Now everyone says that they took the wrong path, their actions were wrong. Do you think so? Then think of this. A group of soldiers is out on patrol. One of them in the lead has broken off or gone to one side and gets blown up by a mine. Yes, you can say he took the wrong path, his actions were wrong. But you can also say that these same actions saved other people's lives. In any case, Anastasia, which religion do you think is closest to you, the one most comprehensible? Vladimir, let us say you had never seen your parents or talked with them. You would probably be happy to hear anyone talk about them, even if they each talked about them a little differently. Where the truth lies, you can judge for yourself after reflecting on everything inside you. After all, you are their offspring. You are your parents' child. As for me, though, I do not need any intermediaries. Well, okay, that's enough about doubts. There are some rather pleasant phenomena that Anastasia has somehow managed to bring about in our reality. I was especially skeptical that she would actually be able to infuse something into the text of the book. These are her own combinations and rhythms, as she said, coming from the depths of eternity. But after the first edition came out in a run of only 4,000 copies, something incredible happened. Many people were so moved by feelings and emotions that poetic verses began flooding in all by themselves. There are a whole lot of them now. These are just ordinary people, not professional poets, who have been writing. There are enough poems to date to put out a whole separate volume of them. In the Moscow group devoted to studying Anastasia phenomena, they say that nowhere in the world, in the past or present, Has there ever been a person or figure capable of provoking such a huge poetic outpouring in such a short time? Another surprising thing is that while in the first book there is almost nothing said about faith or Russia, the majority of the reader's poems speak directly about faith and Russia and bright aspirations. And it seems to me they do this most inspiringly. And this had a calming effect on my thought about Anastasia's influence. After all, the Bible tells us how to distinguish the bad from the good, the false prophet from the bearer of truth. It says, "By their fruits ye shall know them." And if Anastasia's aspirations and her combinations bring forth such radiant poetic feelings, those are undoubtedly good fruits. And I even thought, if this goes on much longer, she's going to turn half the population of Russia into poets, enamored of their motherland, the earth, and all nature around them. I sorted the poems into several categories: anonymous poems, signed poems, poems by soldiers, and poems by government officials. And do you know what this kind of sorting shows? It shows that there is absolutely no point in dividing society up the way we do sometimes and blaming our troubles on certain categories of people, like entrepreneurs, the military, government officials. Their hearts all beat in exactly the same way. And across all these categories, there are people sincerely striving for the light, for the good. As for our troubles, there's something we probably all produce by ourselves. In this edition of the book, I have decided to publish one poem from each category. So the first poem is called Anastasia's Ray. Into our busy, bustling life of lonely souls in crowds immersed, from the vast universe of space, a ray broke through to the earth. It glistened brighter than the light of the sun or of gold of purest hue. My people, greetings, here I am as your brother speaking to you. I have been sent to you by love, sent to you by the age's call. Come to me and take of mine, I give myself to all. Wait there, my friend, where are you going? Why is there sadness on your face? You've been forsaken. Yes, I know. I know all time and space. Dear people, what are you thinking, people? The world is beautiful, no end. I can do everything, dear people, because I am your friend. But the crowd only surged against the ray, rushing along on their fashion-shod feet, and kept on shoving it away into a puddle in the street. The ray dipped into the dirty slush. It felt no offence and shed no tear, but all at once the slush burst forth in a water spring crystal clear. And then a little boy came running, and fearing no punishment therefrom, he leapt feet first into the puddle and drew on the ray's sweet balm. His mamma got angry with despair and wildly waved her arms in dread. But Pushkin's statue on the square suddenly came to life and said, "Now wait, you must not spank the boy. He did not act just out of fun. Pay heed to him, your hearts will be illumined by your sun. Come near and feel his moistened hands. Come close and touch your blessed son. And you will find therein his palms all that the poets have sung, all they've created through the ages, reflected there within the heart. Mama, Moshka, my mama," the little boy hugged his mum. "Mama, can you hear the singing? Hear the song of the happy birds? You know, dear mama, yes, you know it. I shall write you a verse. And now you will be happy, mama, for that is what I want for you. You see, I hear it. Yes, I hear it. I think I can do it too. Into your busy, bustling life of lonely souls in crowds immersed, from the vast universe of space, a ray broke through to the earth. Author unknown. The second poem is called Anastasia Anas. On the image and heroine of Vladimir Megre's book, Anastasia. In Russia, Megre wrote his brand new idea. In book publications and newspaper lines, the Ringing Cedar or Anastasia, which drew attention to himself at the time. It's not the first time that his name I've heard spoken, and yet it is still not that common a name. Yes, Anastasia, so music evoking, or Stasia or Stacy, they all mean the same. The Stacys I know live in cities of shadows, their character simple, of good honest worth. But here in the taiga, in a cedar-ringed meadow, a glimpse of fair goddess, the fairest on earth. Anas, a Siberian of nature's creation, in harmony with her environment lives. Her conscious awareness, her love, inspiration, to animals, plants all around her she gives. Her feelings and thoughts are in tune with the living. The mind of the cosmos is simple and clear. In all of our wide world, believe me, there's nothing escaping her knowledge of stars or light years. Clairvoyant, Anas cured diseases at all ages. The great ringing cedar enhances her reach. She draws upon cultures of all lands and ages for logic and meaning and richness of speech. An analyst practicing nature's ecology, her meaning of life is in tune with the world. Intuitive grasper of highest astrology, there's nothing impossible for this precious girl. N. Mikhailov, Moscow. Third poem is called The Kind Wizard Girl. Galenzik's dolmens, the years wind back. Time has opened a window, just a crack, for the stretches of infinity to be understood, evaluated, felt through and through, recognized as fact, stepping over my threshold limit. Through the light of good in the blue expanses way up high, I come to you, Anastasia, born again in the twinkling of an eye. You are a flower of consciousness and will, your might from cedar trees and forest leaves, and from such charming, mystical, magical thoughts that I'm ready to be one who simply believes. Every beast and insect, raven and jay, every serpent, blade of grass and hay, you wizard girl, kind maven of the way, so many aroused by what you have to say. Your thoughts, ideas, even stronger now today, shed light on all the earth with their bright ray. O. T. Vyalishina Galenzik. Fourth poem is Anastasia's Love. To the woman of my beloved. I shall pray for you are loved, the woman of my own beloved. As his heart's desire, you will be blessed. You will be blessed as I wished for you the best. Keep him safe when he is strong or weak or brave. Keep him safe when he may irrationally behave. Keep my beloved safe and sweet. My days, it seems, have flashed by in a beat. Their crazy dance has burnt me with this heat. My years have started passing all too fleet. My son has started walking on his feet. Your papa is the very best, my son, the very best. It is I who did not manage to open up to him. In life, my son, that can happen on a whim. Another woman takes his fancy and steps in. You are both caressed by the gentle breeze of spring, which tells me in the whisper of the leaves how he feels the warmth, how he feels the joy, both from your hands and from your lips. I shall not dare distract him from the warmth and tenderness of your eyes. But should that not be enough, I shall send you a ray of light to relieve you of your grief. The years will fly past just like a stormy night. Life will seem to you like an empty room. I, as a fading star falling to earth from above, shall chase from your soul the nighttime gloom. And I shall be able to pray, please do believe, so that you, by the light ray illumined, need feel no withering love. I shall be able to pray, for you are loved, the woman of my own beloved. Author unknown. Fifth poem is To Anastasia. To a woman I dedicate this verse. I write as an Air Force flyer. A poet I could never be, but my heart flared true. My breast with fire did burst, Anastasia. Do not think me brash. I can't stop loving you. Your image, a touching pulse for good, pulse louder than any engine ever could. My engine failed, visibility nil, an explosion in the twinkling of an eye. But then your ray of light, your image flashed and blessed. On fragile wings it kept me in flight. A single moment it took, only one. I wished as I looked until my landing gear touched safely down, that I were a blade of grass upon the ground, by your fingers tenderly caressed. Author unknown. Poem number 6. The cedar forest rings and chimes, to Vladimir Megre. Ah, the fragrance of Siberian cedars, the smell of resin very strong, the taiga vast, almost half of a globe sweeping, stretching to one grand endless song. The cedars keep peace since times of old, maintaining the energy of the earth. To brighten the pulse beat of the soul, they ring for all mankind these words. Here dwells among us Anastasia, in spiritual purity's forest art. She watches over Mother Russia through people's holiness of heart. She sends out thoughts and calls to action, to the highway leading to heavenly light, the essence of Velez, Krishna, Rama, Shiva, Buddha, Allah, Christ. These holy thoughts, the star-bright Logos, all old Russian purity their theme, are flying like snowstorms, calling the ages to penetrate to the heart of the dream. With me are forces of light unchanging. I exist for all who walk and plod. I give to all a bright awakening, who do not turn their back on God. Bow before Holy Russia's leading. Bow to her gods, our creators above, in the never-ceasing ring of the cedars, which defy the light as love. So Russians, turn, and with your soul pay heed to all the heavens gives. On the rivers of Lena, Yana, and Ob, God's temple of all the Russia's lives. Step out on the upward road to the light, the cosmic self-programming path discern. We look to your goals as you answer aright, so Russia may to her God's return. Preserver of the cosmic energy of nature, the ringing cedar waits for the one who loves his Russia as God the Savior, whose heart its course for others has run. Then live in peace and love for nature. Brook no dishonesty, live aright. Draw wisdom's radiance from the people's favor and show to others the pathway to light. Such people are called by Anastasia to accept my energy's gentle load, so that the bright force's attentive idea may help those climbing up the road. The cedars call everyone to hope for the prize, on the path to divinity, to beauty's gleam. Awaken, my people, open your eyes, reach out to others, to the heart of the dream. The cosmic expanse opens wide its doors to awaken pilgrims on their climb. To those united on their upward course, the whole cedar forest rings and chimes. Written by Yar N. Kolchanov, president of the Cosmos Society of the Russian Space Exploration Committee, Moscow. Poem number 7, Two Goddesses. Do not come here to see my shame, or think with mute reproach to bless, nor hand nor secret stare can claim to lift the cross from my poor chest. No earthbound cry will scare away the soul of heavenly confusion. It will not blight the holy ray of mind and feelings interfusion. The world is full of sun and storm, of finger snaps and love's fire too. Here ashes, flame, blood, tears are born, where mind is false but feelings true. Wild honey becomes bitter, surely. No sweetness from the wormwood's bloom. Pretenders will not grasp the worldly. The afterlife, the wise will doom. All stories, letters, poems, flowers will waken to the heavenly blue. I see two goddesses, two powers. These are my poetry and you. Verse should not be debased as phantom. It will not see a final breath. You are immortal, we are random. In poems, just like birth and death. By G. Butov, physicist, Krasnodar. End of chapter 30. Chapter 31, Author's Message to Entrepreneurs. The author's attempt to organize a fellowship of Russian entrepreneurs in accord with certain spiritual principles has revealed an evident desire for such a coming together on the part of many entrepreneurs. Notices were sent out all over Moscow. A wider distribution throughout Russia would have entailed a substantial expenditure. The lack of funding and consequently the ultimate failure of the project led to nowhere. Anastasia's plans began to seem unrealizable. During my second visit with her, however, she told me there were no dead-end situations, only that I should not have altered the sequence she had prescribed. The book should have come first, which would have spread the right information and prevented the organizational principles from being tied to monetary concerns. This second visit also settled one other question. An organizational task force had been set up in Moscow to spearhead the formation of the fellowship, but we could not come to a decision on either the selection criteria for new members or how the selection committee should be constituted. Anastasia stated the following: one's heartfelt impulsion and one's aspiration to strive for such a fellowship are the principal criteria for eligibility. Nobody has the right to refuse access to anyone manifesting such qualities. One's past record is irrelevant. For the one who was most worthy yesterday may well turn out to be the least worthy today, and vice versa. Subsequently, when you get together to determine the eligibility criteria according to the impulses of your hearts, you will also be able to work out the specific terms on which applicants are accepted into the fellowship. The blame for altering the sequence prescribed by Anastasia falls, of course, on me. To all those Moscow entrepreneurs who wanted to join the fellowship, I hereby offer my sincere apologies. First, for postponing the initial conference to a later date, and secondly, for the consequent drain on your time and finances. The task force was indeed made up of dedicated entrepreneurs. Many of you had limited time to devote to the project, but you found the time or stole it from something else. You worked on drafting documents and the principles for the future society. The secretariat, too, similarly made up of Muscovites, was fueled by enthusiasm. In addition, Moscow students put together a magnificent computer version of the Future Society's catalogue. It made it all the more painful for me to look back once I realized my mistake and see the hopelessness of the situation. The only way out was to muster the strength needed to correct the mistake and write the book. Without a word of explanation to anyone, explanation seemed impossible at that point, I went off by myself and began to write. It is only now that the book exists and is spreading more and more right across Russia and starting to fulfill the function specified for it by Anastasia that I can talk about the future. I am more confident now about the possibility of seeing such a society actually come into being. The reaction to the book indicates that it will attract a sufficient number of entrepreneurs from the various regions of the country. The conference will take place. There will be a fellowship. In acting on my own, I may well have offended some of those who worked alongside me in Moscow. I should particularly like to single out 3 Moscow students who gave their all to assisting and participating in the Secretariat of the Future Society. They were the ones who keyboarded the text of the first book on their computers and kept on keyboarding even after their exam session started. I wasn't in a position to compensate them for their work. They knew this, understood the situation, but still went on keyboarding. Others too would have probably reacted with understanding had they known the whole picture. If that applies to any of you, I apologize for my lack of trust in you and for my temporary disappearance. Of course, there is a great deal more I need to learn and understand, including the degree to which Anastasia herself has been involved in all of this. I'd like to know just how this reclusive young woman from the Siberian taiga managed not only to draw up plans like these, but also to have them implemented in real life. It's not that she is predicting the future. She's literally creating the future. She struggles to bring it about and feels the struggle in her heart. In fact, it is something on the order of a master business plan which she has formulated in her head, keeping track of all its details down to the nuances of psychological probabilities. She is working her hardest to make it come about and calling on us to participate in its realization. But we are not simply blind mice, but normal, professionally experienced adults, and we must understand that a single individual, especially one still relatively new to entrepreneurial practice, cannot foresee everything ahead of time. Anastasia affirms just the organization alone, the spiritual, yes, spiritual, contact among such people as entrepreneurs is a salutary reaction of cosmic proportions. There is no need to dictate what will happen next. What will happen next will point out its own path and set its priorities in the occurrences of daily life. What kind of reaction is this? What path is she alluding to? Even though her aspiration to the light can be felt intuitively, nevertheless, we must make sense of everything ourselves and work out the details. I wish you all happiness and success. End of chapter 31. Dreams Coming True. Editor's Afterword. In the summer of 1996, a tired-looking man was standing on a street corner in downtown Moscow with a self-published 96-page volume in his hands, trying to sell it to passers-by. The book's title was The Ringing Cedar, Anastasia, and the man called himself Vladimir Megre. A woman stopped by, looked at the inconspicuous cover, talked to the author, and bought a copy. Next day, she was back, smiling, her eyes shining, to pick up an entire pack to give to everybody she knew. As it was, the first print run of 2,000 copies of Anastasia sold out in a matter of weeks. What happened next was as miraculous as the story Vladimir Megre had written down. New print runs, first of 2,000, then of 10,000, sold out within weeks. Not long after, millions more were printed and sold. By 1999, Vladimir Megre was one of Russia's most popular authors, and the 7 books published to date have sold over 10 million copies in their original Russian alone, not counting their translated editions in more than a dozen languages. The books in the Ringing Cedars series started producing incredible changes in people's hearts and minds, the effect of which is now being felt throughout Russia and beyond. What happened here? How can it be that with no advertisement other than word of mouth, this book by an unknown author became a national and then an international bestseller, distributed initially by readers alone before it was accepted by even a single bookstore? How can it be that one copy from this first 2,000 copy print run actually found its way to the stacks of the US Library of Congress? Why have people of all ages, from school children to pensioners, and in all walks of life, from teachers to public officials and from scientists to clergymen, felt such inspiration from the book to the point of writing poetry and creating works of art? Why did a former member of the Russian parliament, an economist by the name of Dr. Viktor Medikov, write an entire book, Putin, Megre, and Russia's Future, stating that the Ringing Cedars was becoming Russia's new national idea? Why did the Supreme Mufti of Russia, Talgat Tajuddin, publicly declare in a televised interview, "I love these books. I read them and get a lot out of them for myself"? Why have leaders of other confessions made equally laudatory remarks? Why did my mother once bring me home a copy of Anastasia from her yoga class on the recommendation of her instructor and gingerly request that I read it? Why, when applying to enter the doctoral program in forestry at 6 top-rated American universities, I submitted a research proposal based on the ideas set forth by Anastasia, I was accepted by all of them? 4 of the schools, in fact, offered me full financial support with a scholarship. And here I am now at the University of Missouri at Columbia, writing my PhD dissertation on the significance of ideas from the Ringing Cedars for the future of forestry and agriculture in Russia and the world as a whole. But here comes the most striking part. How can it be that all these developments, from the wild popularity of the Ringing Cedars series to the outpouring of readers' poetry and art, had been described in the very first book before coming to pass? As it is, true to what Anastasia said in the very first volume, millions of people have been moved by her words. Many thousands have planted trees, written poetry and songs, or created works of art, all inspired by the book. Readers' clubs have proliferated throughout Russia and abroad. Numerous readers' conferences throughout Russia and Europe have brought together thousands of people asking questions they had never even thought of before. In just the scant few years since the book's initial publication, Russia has witnessed the birth of a powerful eco-village movement, inspiring thousands of people to leave their jobs in large cities and, despite formidable obstacles, move to one of the many eco-settlements now sprouting all over the country. Russian immigrants to Germany, America, and Canada have been flocking back to their homeland to establish new self-sufficient homesteads on their ancestors' lands. In the eco-village where my family now owns a plot of land, our neighbours include economists, singers, entrepreneurs, engineers, writers, mechanics, managers, and executives, artists, peasants, young families, single mothers, pensioners, and even school children, coming from all over Russia and other countries once part of the Soviet Union, from Moscow to Irkutsk, and from Ivanovo to Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. Whence comes all this inspiration? The answer is simple. Anastasia resonates so strongly in tune with people's hearts that one cannot fail to inwardly recognize the truth emanating from it. How many times have I heard personal examples of this instant recognition? People who have been searching for years or decades for meaningful answers to questions on the purpose of life, on man's place in nature, have finally found them in this book. But should it be surprising that the image of a way of life founded on the ideals of love, beauty, and non-violence, as presented by Anastasia, would resonate so strongly with our inner self? After all, does not every one of us want to live in a free society of kind and happy people in a world without wars, crime, or oppression? In a world where not a single tear need run down a child's cheek, and where families live in love and prosperity? Do we not want to live without monstrous industries destroying and polluting both nature and man? Do we not want to enjoy creative labor for the benefit of both our families and our communities, instead of suffering through boring jobs merely to enrich faceless corporations? Do we not want a society based on mutual help and cooperation rather than competition? But you may say this was just Anastasia's dream, or just Vladimir Megre's dream, and a dream is simply a dream. But cannot each of us dream of a desirable future and then act to bring this future about? Is it not what John Lennon was singing about in his Imagine? You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one. Is it not what one of the greatest economists of the 20th century, E.F. Schumacher, was referring to in his seminal work, Small is Beautiful? Now, it might be said that this is a romantic, a utopian vision. True enough. What we have today in modern industrial society is not romantic and certainly not utopian, as we have it right here. But it is in very deep trouble and holds no promise of survival. We jolly well have to have the courage to dream if we want to survive and give our children a chance of survival. The crisis of the industrial society will become worse and end in disaster until or unless we develop a new lifestyle which is compatible with the real needs of human nature, with the health of living nature around us, and with the resource endowment of the world. Fortunately, the disaster may still be averted. As more and more people in Russia and throughout the world, drawing their inspiration from the Ringing Cedars, acquire the courage to dream and create an image of radiant reality for themselves and their children, and then get down to work in this direction. The spiritual and practical revelations presented in this book are unparalleled in so many areas that their discussion could fill entire volumes. Let me but mention Anastasia's beloved dashniks, a discovery of exceptional significance. As it happens, the most obvious and significant things often go the most easily unnoticed. This is particularly true about Russia's Dasha movement. Judge for yourself. Anastasia and Vladimir Megre were the first to speak about the importance of dashniks. Now it turns out that according to widely available official statistics published every year in Russia's primary statistical source, Rossiya Vtsifark, over 35 million families, and this amounts to 70% of the country's population, grow their own food on their plots and collectively provide far more vegetables, fruit, and even meat and milk than the whole country's commercial agriculture taken together. Why had nobody paid attention to these numbers earlier? Why didn't they ever surface in the discussion on the present and future of Russia, and indeed the world's agriculture? Why did nobody take seriously President Boris Yeltsin's confession that he was spending his weekends tending a vegetable garden, growing potatoes and radishes? Should you choose to research for yourself the questions discussed by Anastasia, you will soon discover the truth of her assertion that her knowledge is already shared, at least partially, by a number of people in our world, and that collectively they know practically everything, only they do not fully understand how it works. Take communication with plants, for example. It sounds incredible at first, but it only requires a reading of Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird's well-researched The Secret Life of Plants to gain an entirely new perspective and conclude she might be right. But could it be possible that all diseases are curable through such interaction with plants? As Anastasia argues, it would take a complex and lengthy scientific study to test this hypothesis. Fortunately, this is not necessary as, in addition to a growing number of personal testimonials from thousands of people, there is factual evidence at hand that can dispel any doubts. Over centuries and millennia, the Hunzakut, a people living in a valley in northern Pakistan, have been practicing an agriculture very similar to the one described by Anastasia, eating food exclusively from their family garden plots, and thus establishing a closed loop of matter and information exchange between people and their plants. They are recognized as the most healthy and long-living people on earth. The Hunzakut commonly live to more than 100 years, and men becoming fathers at age 90 is not a rarity. Can it be that information exchange between an individual person and a plant Anastasia talks about is the missing link to understanding human nutrition? Even in the absence of scientific studies, why not try it? The science will catch up. Furthermore, why should we be skeptical about Anastasia's ability to live without concern for acquiring food or clothing, effortlessly relying on nature for a complete life support system? Is not the exact same ideal of life taught to humanity in the Bible? He who watches the wind will not sow, and he who looks at the clouds will not reap. Or, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink. Also, in our own not so distant past, Nobel laureate Albert Schweitzer testified on the basis of his experiences in Africa. In return for very little work, nature supplies the native with nearly everything that he requires for his support. Looking around, should one doubt that truly happy children can only be raised in nature? Jean Liedloff, who spent 2.5 years in a society living in close relationship with nature and consequently knowing no such things as crying children, crime, or depression, speaks about this in her book, The Continuum Concept, with very much the same conclusions as Anastasia. Again, this list could continue. In fact, researchers could, and probably will, write volumes of commentary on almost every statement contained in Anastasia. Yes, doubts naturally do creep in. It still sounds all too improbable to our traditional way of thinking. And even if the heart feels a genuine light emanating from the book, the mind often refuses to accept it as real. This is an all too familiar dilemma, fully experienced even by Vladimir Megre himself. However, as the series progresses and you come to embrace the ever more significant revelations set forth in the subsequent volumes and immerse yourself in their ever more poetic language, the idea that it could all be simply thought up should gradually melt away. You hold in your hands a flower which will unfold its petals to reveal a most remarkable masterpiece, unique in all of Russia's literature and possibly the world's as well. Indeed, its significance goes far beyond literature. This book possesses a tremendous, unprecedented potential to change life on our whole planet for the better. Do you know of any other book that in a matter of just a few years has succeeded in not only stirring the hearts and minds of millions of people, but also arousing these same people to extraordinary acts of creation in their everyday lives, developing new modes of expression in all the arts, taking or embracing non-violent initiatives to preserve and enhance life on this planet as we know it? Every day, more and more people are joining in. Now that the Ringing Cedars is globally available in English, the realization of Anastasia's dream is certain to take on planetary proportions. I have no doubt about it. In the winter of 2003, at my office in downtown Moscow, just one block away from the street corner outside the Taganskaya metro station, where Vladimir Megre had been selling the first copies of his book only 6 years earlier, Igor Vladimirov, head of the Anastasia Readers Club in St. Petersburg, mused one day, looking at the snowflakes dancing outside the window. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have Anastasia published in English? It would, I agreed. You are a professional project manager and you speak English fluently, isn't that true? Yes, more or less. Then why are you sitting here? We laughed. A subsequent chain of circumstances and events led me to certain people, including Vladimir Megre himself, who became instrumental in carrying out the English translation project. The story of the unusual coincidences and struggles behind this edition could easily form the stuff of a suspense thriller, which I shall probably write one day. In the meantime, I take comfort in the fact that you are now holding a masterfully translated volume in your hands. This alone is a good indication that dreams really do come true. Columbia, Missouri, USA, January 2005. Leonard Sharashkin. The series at a glance. Anastasia, the first book of the Ringing Cedars series, tells the story of entrepreneur Vladimir Megre's trade trip to the Siberian taiga in 1995, where he witnessed incredible spiritual phenomena connected with sacred ringing cedar trees. He spent 3 days with a woman named Anastasia, who shared with him her unique outlook on subjects as diverse as gardening, child-rearing, healing, nature, sexuality, religion, and more. This wilderness experience transformed Vladimir so deeply that he abandoned his commercial plans and, penniless, went to Moscow to fulfill Anastasia's request and write a book about the spiritual insights she so generously shared with him. True to her promise, this life-changing book, once written, has become an international bestseller and has touched hearts of millions of people worldwide. The Ringing Cedars of Russia, the second book of the series, in addition to providing a fascinating behind-the-scenes look at the story of how Anastasia came to be published, offers a deeper exploration of the universal concepts so dramatically revealed in Book 1. It takes the reader on an adventure through the vast expanses of space, time, and spirit, from the paradise-like glade in the Siberian taiga to the rough urban depths of Russia's capital city, from the ancient mysteries of our forebears to a vision of humanity's radiant future. The Space of Love, the third book of the series, describes author's second visit to Anastasia, rich with new revelations on natural child rearing and alternative education, on the spiritual significance of breastfeeding and the meaning of ancient megaliths. It shows how each person's thoughts can influence the destiny of the entire earth and describes practical ways of putting Anastasia's vision of happiness into practice. Maigret shares his new outlook on education and children's real creative potential after a visit to a school where pupils build their own campus and cover the 10-year Russian school program in just 2 years, complete with an account of an armed intrusion into Anastasia's habitat. The book highlights the limitless power of love and nonviolence. Co-Creation, the fourth book, and centerpiece of the series, paints a dramatic living image of the creation of the universe and humanity's place in this creation, making this primordial mystery relevant to our everyday living today. Deeply metaphysical, yet at the same time down-to-earth practical, this poetic, heartfelt volume helps us uncover answers to the most significant questions about the essence and meaning of the universe and the nature and purpose of our existence. It also shows how and why the knowledge of these answers, innate in every human being, has become obscured and forgotten, and points the way toward reclaiming this wisdom and, in partnership with nature, manifesting the energy of love through our lives. Who Are We? Book 5 of the series describes the author's search for the real-life proofs of Anastasia's vision presented in the previous volumes. Finding these proofs and taking stock of ongoing global environmental destruction, Vladimir Maigret describes further practical steps for putting Anastasia's vision into practice. Full of beautiful, realistic images of a new way of living in cooperation with the earth and each other, this book also highlights the role of children in making us aware of the precariousness of their present situation and in leading the global transition towards a happy, violence-free society. The Book of Kin, the sixth book of the series, describes another visit by the author to Anastasia's glade in the Siberian taiga and his conversations with his growing son, which caused him to take a new look at education, science, history, family, and nature. Through parables and revelatory dialogues and stories, Anastasia then leads Vladimir Maigret and the reader on a shocking rediscovery of the pages humanity's real history that have been distorted or kept secret for thousands of years. This knowledge sheds light on the causes of war, oppression, and violence in the modern world and guides us in preserving the wisdom of our ancestors and passing it over to future generations. The Energy of Life, Book 7 of the series, reasserts the power of human thought and the influence of our thinking on our lives and the destiny of the entire planet and the universe. It also brings forth a practical understanding of ways to consciously control and build up the power of our creative thought. The book sheds still further light on the forgotten pages of humanity's history, on religion and on the roots of interracial and interreligious conflict, on ideal nutrition, and shows how a new way of thinking and lifestyle is true harmony with nature, can lead to happiness and solve the personal and societal problems of crime, corruption, misery, conflict, war, and violence. The New Civilization, the eighth book of the series, is not yet complete. The first part of the book, already published as a separate volume, describes yet another visit by Vladimir Maigret to Anastasia and their son, and offers new insights into practical cooperation with nature, showing in ever greater detail how Anastasia's lifestyle applies to our lives, describing how the visions presented in previous volumes have already taken beautiful form in real life and produced massive changes in Russia and beyond. The author discerns the birth of a new civilization. The book also paints a vivid image of America's radiant future, in which the conflict between the powerful and the helpless, the rich and the poor, the city and the country, can be transcended and thereby led to transformations in both the individual and society. Rights of Love, Book 8, Part 2, published as a separate volume, contrasts today's mainstream attitudes to sex, family, childbirth, and education with our forebears' lifestyle, which reflected their deep spiritual understanding of the significance of conception, pregnancy, home birth, and upbringing of the young in an atmosphere of love. In powerful poetic prose, Maigret describes their ancient way of life, grounded in love and non-violence, and shows the practicability of this same approach today. Through the life story of one family who portrays the radiant world of the ancient Russian Vedic civilization, the drama of its destruction and its rebirth millennia later in our present time. To be continued. Readers' reviews. Yes, at last. Truth has not been distorted by dogma or someone's ego. I might explode from emotion if I read any more. I had a hard time getting myself to just stand still. I was jumping all over my garden saying hello to all my trees. I've always talked to trees, but I didn't know they were listening. I then ran off and bought loads of seeds and spent days putting whole packets of them in my mouth, only to get very sick indeed. For little did I know that the seeds bought in the supermarket are covered in rat poison. Have we gone mad? I've got this strange reputation of a person who lives in a pink world, a dreamer believing in an unrealistic utopia of happiness, a witch, a madwoman. Well, thank you, Anastasia. Finally, I could take my place as just a normal man, a woman. I'm so excited. Fancy me not knowing that there were a whole bunch of pink worlders just around the corner. Vladimir is a true hero. He went all the way to the bottom of despair, and he used his suffering to change. Merit and achievement, success and glory belong to those who have managed to change the most in their lives. Anna, Portugal. In 1996, I spent a day in the Australian bush with an Aboriginal woman. This was my first encounter of what I call a natural human. Her connectedness with nature blew me away, and I wanted that for myself and all of mankind. Likewise, Anastasia is in a total harmony with nature and gives practical steps to rekindle in us that which is our true essence. I cannot even begin to describe the depth of the effect Anastasia has had on me, and I have only read book 1. For the first time in my life, I feel affirmed on a very deep level and feel free to be me. I am so excited to have discovered these books, and I'm fully committed to doing what I can to help spread their message. Mary Dwen, New Zealand. I truly found lots of inspiration in the book. I have a lovely garden plot, which I have worked for over 40 years in the suburban Denver area. And while I have tried to work with nature consciously for probably 20 years, I feel I fall quite short of anything that resembles the connection that Anastasia has. I am determined this next spring to do it exactly as she recommends, because I do feel that humanity's healing will only come about with a reconnection to nature. I am hopeful of many people also wanting to read the messages of hope and rediscovering the potential that awaits man as he reclaims his divine inheritance through right action and right use of will, attuned to spirit. Aurelia, Colorado, USA. Anastasia and subsequent volumes tell the story of a return of mankind to a state of grace through love, actualizing real love to everything around us and keeping our thoughts, hearts, minds in the place of love, touching with love the earth and celebrating the God's creation through loving it and caring for it. I think the most important lesson for us is to move back to the work of the Creator and away from ways which we destroy it. That is what I take from the series, and find myself inspired to work harder and being joyous, thankful, and loving. In my own life, our family works towards goals that aren't measured in dollars, which is a much richer life than working for material wealth. We have a certified organic and wild crops farm, so I'm very receptive to the medicines of the earth and see the importance of people interacting in a healing way with God's creation, the earth. In a very humble way, our work with native plants on our farm could be seen as demonstration of a way people can take some of the Ringing Cedars series ideas and put them to work. I think if people find a larger purpose for their lives than collecting material goods, everyone will be happier rediscovering the scope of humanity's tools from the Creator. Anastasia helps with explaining ways to have a richer life, raise healthier children, filling one's heart rather than one's pockets. I do not agree with everything written, and many people will find ideas threatening. Yet, if we don't discover new ways of being human beings and put them to work, if we don't have a spirit rich enough to live with love and respect for God's creations, we have no future. Penny Frazier, Missouri, USA. Next letter. There has been a very significant change taking place within me since reading the series. It has been a casting off of the selfish elements within me and walking into a vast chasm of blessings. What is possible, I do not yet know, only that an awareness and a consciousness is possible in this life. My life is hopeful now. Allen, Wisconsin, USA. At work, I walked by a book lying face down on a messy table, and it called me. I picked up the book, flipped it over, and the cover clicked. I sat down and started reading. That night, I took the book home, and over the next few days, I found a piece of life, of the spiritual cosmos, which I knew had been missing. In my disgust and shame at Vladimir Megre's reaction to Anastasia, I saw a reflection of my own attitudes towards concepts I was uncomfortable with. Although Anastasia herself is a little odd, I had no difficulty in believing in her presence, her existence. After reading the book, I slept under the stars near some currant bushes, but some possums awoke me in the middle of the night. I then did some Reiki and sent the energy to Anastasia and felt myself floating in cedar branches, softly brushing me with a bright yet soft ball of radiant light shining back upon me. In a tarot read, I asked about Anastasia and drew the Guardian card. 3 years ago, my family moved to the country, our own Dasha. I now look forward to next spring and coding the seeds and creating a space of love for both my garden and my family. Dietrich Jacobi, Missouri, USA. Anastasia's messages throughout the Ringing Cedars series have further illuminated the divine work of birthing, caring for, and parenting children. I am a doula, a home birth mother, a dancer-singer who has been inspired by Anastasia's reminder that we are all born to know and share our light. I feel like the book's messages have found a natural home in my being. Anastasia is a being who I know lives, and she desperately wants us to feel how alive we are and how alive the earth is. We belong to the earth, and we must find out our happiness so that the earth will feel her happiness as well. Elise, Missouri, USA. My acquaintance who paid a visit to the Altai several years ago received a few tiny scraps of cedar wood from a local woman. She told him to wear it on his body. He would need it. It would protect him. This summer, he did some major house cleaning, sorting things he didn't want anymore. He stumbled upon a matchbox with these slivers of cedar wood and thought, is this true or mere superstition? Shall I finally do away with them? The next day, by coincidence, his friend offered him the Anastasia book as a present. He read, gasped, and made a pendant out of the pieces. A few weeks later, he showed me the pendant, and it was breathtaking. I really gasped for breath, even though at that point he hadn't yet told me his story. My guess would be that he received some shivers of ringing cedar. It was so moving to see it. Many more stirrings over here. Really trust that this will be worldwide. Dickey, Netherlands. As a 75-year-old American who finished the third Anastasia book by Vladimir Megre, The Space of Love, I am in the process of digesting its substance. The American must pick up and go to a place that Vladimir Megre shows him. Megre shows him wonders. But those expecting wonders to be valid only if found on American soil will be taken aback to learn they are in a land that rarely thinks of the New World. Anastasia's Siberian taiga is a land that measures history in millennia instead of decades. There, Vladimir meets those who have mystical affection for their country and culture. He finds values resting on rock-solid Christian principles, not bearing Christian labels. There are values descending from ancient insights, approved by generations, faithful to the soil of their forebears. Their love for Mother Russia is a love not understood even by the most patriotic American. Christians will recognize much from the Old Testament as well as from the New, especially Isaiah chapter 11. This is not to say the Anastasia series promotes or detracts from that teaching. Instead, it parallels and edifies. The Christian emerges with his faith firmer and respect for Megre's Anastasia. After 3 books, I am digesting, and there are moments when my credulity vanishes. Then lines appear that can have been written only to me. Then my unbelief is overturned. It is like the story of Lazarus. I believe, but help my unbelief. Coincidences are endless. Gallagher Rule, Ponca City, Oklahoma, USA. And finally, about the Ringing Cedars series. In 1994, a Siberian elder told entrepreneur Vladimir Megre a fascinating story about ringing cedars, sacred trees which heal bodily diseases and elevate the human spirit. The elder told him where such a cedar was growing in the Siberian backwoods. Intrigued, Vladimir Megre delved into literature on Siberian cedar trees and was one of the first Russian businessmen to rediscover the tremendous folk medicinal, nutritional, and commercial value of virgin oil pressed from Siberian cedar nuts. However, knowledge of the traditional technique of pressing the oil had been lost. Determined to rediscover the secret and launch a highly lucrative production of cedar nut oil, Vladimir Megre set out an expedition to find the tree, but his encounter with the elder's granddaughter, named Anastasia, transformed him so deeply that he abandoned his commercial plans and, penniless, went to Moscow to fulfill his promise to Anastasia and write a book about the spiritual insights she so generously shared with him. What happened next has thrilled and inspired millions. With no advertisement other than word of mouth, books of the Ringing Cedars series have sold over 10 million copies in Russia alone and have been translated into 20 languages, making Vladimir Megre one of Russia's most widely read authors. Inspired by the Ringing Cedars, thousands of people are now planting trees, changing their lifestyle, and in search for a mortgage-free existence and spiritual reconnection with the earth, are relocating to new eco-villages which have sprouted all over Russia and beyond. Thousands of readers have felt a huge creative upsurge and started writing poetry and songs and doing paintings. These mind-stirring books, read like a fascinating novel, have the authenticity of a documentary account and present spiritual insights of incredible depth. as books that address issues in which all our way of living and thinking is involved. They cannot be confined to a single category, spanning dozens of subjects from child rearing to gardening, from adventure to the meaning of human life, from megalithic science to breastfeeding, and from sexuality to religion. They reassert the limitless creative potential hidden in each of us and present an incredibly beautiful and equally practicable vision of humanity's spiritual connection to nature that helps us understand ourselves and heal our earth. Vladimir Megre could not know that his 1994 to 95 trade trips would change his entire life and affect the whole of humanity. Anastasia's messages have spread like wildfire throughout Russia and beyond. News reporters are already writing about a new dawn unfolding and an eco-village revolution taking place, which may change the country's and the whole world's destiny. Read these books and witness the birth of a radiant vision that has changed our life and may change yours. The author, Vladimir Megre, born in 1950, was a well-known entrepreneur from a Siberian city of Novosibirsk. In 1995, after hearing a fascinating account about the power of ringing cedars from a Siberian elder, he organized a trade exhibition into the Siberian taiga to rediscover the lost technique of pressing virgin cedar nut oil containing high curative powers, as well as to find the ringing cedar tree. However, his encounter on his trip with a Siberian woman named Anastasia transformed him so deeply that he abandoned his business and went to Moscow to write a book about the spiritual insights she shared with him. Vladimir Megre now lives near the city of Vladimir, Russia, 240 kilometers, 150 miles, east of Moscow, devoting himself to writing. Following the runaway success of his series, he has spoken at readers' conferences throughout Russia and Europe, as well as established the Anastasia Foundation, a non-profit organization aimed at promoting the ideas contained in the books and providing support to Russia's nascent eco-village movement. The translator, John Wordsworth, originally from Vancouver, British Columbia, has 40 years of experience in Russian English translation, from classical poetry to modern short stories. For the past 23 years, he has been associated with the University of Ottawa in Canada as a Russian language teacher, translator and editor. Most recently as a research associate and administrative assistant with the university's Slavic Research Group. A published Russian language poet himself, he and his wife, poet and amateur artist Susan K. Wordsworth, are directors of the Sasquatch Literary Arts Performance Series in Ottawa. Now a certified Russian English translator, John Wordsworth is in the process of translating the remaining volumes in Vladimir Megre's Ringing Cedars series. The editor, Leonid Sharashkin, is writing his doctoral dissertation on the spiritual, cultural, and economic significance of the Russian Dasha gardening movement at the University of Missouri at Columbia. He also travels across America and internationally speaking about the Ringing Cedars series and its global impact. After receiving a master's degree in natural resource management from Indiana University at Bloomington, he worked for 2 years as program manager at the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, Russia, in Moscow, where he also served as editor of the Russians' largest environmental magazine, the Panda Times. Together with his wife, Irina Sharashkina, he has translated into Russian Small is Beautiful and A Guide for the Perplexed by E.F. Schumacher, The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird, The Continuum Concept by Jean Liedloff, and Birth Without Violence by Frederick Leboyer. So that is the end of this beautiful series of, well, the first book of this beautiful series, Anastasia. My name is JCK. I hope you enjoyed my first little audiobook, and stay with me on my channel. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please join my mailing list, and you will be kept up to date with everything that I do in future. See you later. Thank you.